Hey again, it's me, still talking about adoption. I realized in the first video that I did that I was going to talk about what it meant to adopt a child. Instead, I sort of just talked about the process that I went through in adopting Robert. Um, I think one of the questions that I get asked a lot is not how, but why did I adopt a child? I said in the last video it's because I'd always wanted to be a parent and it just didn't work out. But I have found that being a parent, raising a child, is probably the most humanizing activity a person can do, at least me. And what do I mean by that? Before I adopted Robert, my life was all about me. It was about my self actualization. It was about me being the center of my world. It was about what I wanted people to think about me. When I got Robert, I immediately stopped being the focus of my life. My life no longer seemed to revolve around me, except in those areas where I needed to be successful in order to be able to take care of Robert. And one of the first big lessons I learned was that pride could not stand in the way of taking care of my son. So if I needed help, if I needed something, I had to disregard what I thought people would think about me for asking for it, um, and ask for the help anyway. It had to be done. So the other thing I wanted to say that didn't come out in the last video is adopting children from the foster system. Um, there are so many kids in the foster system that need adoption. In fact, I was asked if I would adopt more than one when I did it. The weekend that I first met Robert, when I went to the foster home where he lived, there were three other boys there, and one of them, a 14-year-old, immediately came up to me and asked me to adopt him. And it almost broke my heart, to have to say no, because I knew how desperately this boy wanted to have a family of his own, and a father of his own. I did consider adopting other children, but when I would look at Robert, what struck me about him was the first 10 years of his life had been so rough, and he had had so many things taken away from him, and he'd never had anything to call his own, that it really seemed like he should be entitled to have his own dad and not have to share. And that was my reason for not adopting another child. Even though I thought about it, I did think maybe it would be healthy for him to have a sibling. But ultimately, I felt that what he really needed was to be the center of attention, that everything needed to be about him, and that his world needed to be stabilized, and he needed to feel secure and loved. So that was what I focused on. I did not think about others as much after that. I think if you look at my Facebook photo album, that's kind of reflected. Sometimes when I look at some photo albums on Facebook, there's tons of pictures of the Facebook person whose page it is. Um, when you look at mine, there's tons of pictures of Robert. Very few of me. But then I see myself every day in the mirror, so why do I need a picture? So that was why I um, chose to adopt, um, or more specifically, to say it more deeply. I think that had I not adopted a child and I'd gotten to be 54 years old and had only worked on, say, a career, that my humanity would be very incomplete. Um, I think the only folks that maybe can reach the level of humanity that parenting can allow you to reach are those men and women who choose to go and live lives of contemplation, monastics, men and women who go into orders and who isolate themselves from society. And then it may seem self-absorbed, but they are really focusing in on themselves and their relationship with God, and move well beyond just the superficiality of what Facebook pictures I'm going to post of myself. And I think parenting does the same, albeit on a very different track. And it seems funny because it's like parenting is probably one of the most common of human activities. But if I had not adopted a child, if I had not had that responsibility, I never would have found some of the deep human areas that I needed to explore. Mortality was one of them. That was a big one. About a year ago, I had not faced the issue of what was going to happen to Robert when he grew up because it was scary. I just didn't really want to. I didn't want to deal with it, and I didn't have to. It was years away until he was finished with school, and I was healthy, and who didn't think anything bad was going to happen. So I'll just deal with that later. And then on my way to work a little over a year ago, a lady ran a red light, T-boned my car, totaled it. I had to be cut out of the car and transported to the hospital, and was hurt, not terribly, but enough to, profoundly be shocked by the experience. One of the realizations at that time, too, was if something bad had happened to me, what would happen to my son? In fact, my biggest fear immediately was my son. He was at school, I knew that, but I didn't know what was going to happen to me. While they were cutting me out of a car, was I going to wind up being sedated? Was I going to be unable to respond? And I needed someone to know about my son and what to do about him. Fortunately, the policeman at the scene actually took it upon himself to go to the school where I worked, inform the principal that I was in the hospital, and she sent the assistant principal up. And when she asked me if there's anything that they could do, and I talked about my son, she said, "We will get him here at the end of the school day if that's what needs to be done." And I was just, grateful beyond belief, because now I knew I could not worry about him, but worry about what had happened to me, having been hit by a car. Happily, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. I survived, but the experience was enough to get me focused on thinking about his future, what he was going to do, and financially what he was going to do. And in the year, or a little over a year since that's happened, I've taken a lot of steps to take care of him. But that was one of the real deep places of fear that I had to go into, which I think people who don't have children never face, which is what is going to happen to my child. And not only does one have to take steps to do something, but one also has to accept that there is a chance, a fate, or a larger will that makes these decisions that the parent can't control and has no say over. So the best I could do was set up a framework for Robert, for his future, which I have done, and then hope and pray for the rest. And God willing, I'll be around long enough so that when I do go, he'll be a middle-aged man, and he'll be able to cope, both emotionally and materially, with me being gone. And I don't think unless you have a child, that sense of your own mortality and what that means, what the implication of dying is, can really be brought out to that vivid of a level. Prior to that, I didn't think much of death. Prior to that, I suppose, except if I was about to fall down or something. But having a kid and spending a certain number of years just avoiding even thinking about the issue, and then having to think about it, having to sit down and seriously consider what it means to die. What implication is there in death? I don't know what happens after death. I'll go with the Orthodox belief that I'll go somewhere and arrive in paradise and learn all those things that I wasn't able to learn here on earth. But what I also realized was there is a big implication for those that I care about and I love, especially my son. And I never would have gotten to that level of understanding without having him there to make me go there. Am I grateful for that? I don't know what I am for that. Shocked, I think, sometimes. To get to a certain age and realize that death is a part of life, and that we have to prepare for dying, and not just our own deaths, but the left, for those left behind, what it means for Robert. So he and I have had conversations over the years where I've tried to explain to him that there will be a time in his life when I'm not there. I'll be gone. And what that's going to mean. And how I want that to not be a catastrophe for him. One of the easiest ways of dealing with my own death was thinking, well, I'll just keep Robert with me until I die. And then I thought, he'll wake up one morning and perhaps he'll be 40 and I'll be dead in my bed. And he'll call the police and they'll realize that he needs someone to take care of him. So on the same day, he will lose his home and his father. And I thought, how catastrophic that would be for him. And I didn't want that to happen. I said, when we lose a parent, we're supposed to be sad. But if we're adults, it isn't supposed to destroy our lives. And I was afraid it would destroy his. So we've talked a lot over the years about how at some point, when he's a young man, he will move on to develop a life with a lot more independence from me. Now, right now, he thinks it's going to be with his girlfriend, and I'm fully in favor of that. Spending your life in love with someone, it would be marvelous. Didn't happen to me, but if it could happen for him, I'd be thrilled to death. But if not, a life where he would be able to exert as much independence as he possibly can without having to rely on somebody who eventually will be gone and he will then not be able to rely on. So that's some of the more profound implications of being a parent, adoptive or otherwise. Next time I'll talk a little bit more about what an adoptive child's specific challenges can be, and in Robert's case were. So, till then, Merry Christmas and see you soon.